My parents lied about my sibling. Turns out they never existed. I was 13 when I started questioning everything. Growing up, I had always heard about my older brother, Daniel. My parents spoke of him in passing, like a ghost lingering in our home. Daniel used to love that book, my mom would say when I picked up The Hobbit. Your brother was always great at math. My dad would remind me whenever I struggled with fractions. But there were no pictures of Daniel. No old toys, no childhood drawings, no birthday cards from distant relatives. Just stories. At first, I didn't question it. I assumed he had died young, maybe before I was born. But whenever I asked, my parents would deflect. It's too painful to talk about, Mom would whisper. Then, on a rainy November afternoon, I found something strange. I was helping Mom clean the attic when I stumbled upon an old photo album. Inside were pictures of my parents in their younger years, smiling at the beach, posing at their wedding, and celebrating my first birthday. But there was no Daniel. Not in a single picture. My stomach twisted. Had they hidden them away? That night, I did something I'd never done before. I searched the house for proof of my brother's existence. Drawers, closets, basement boxes, nothing. And then I checked the old filing cabinet in Dad's office. Inside, I found my birth certificate. And only mine. No record of a Daniel. That's when I confronted them. Where are Daniel's records? I asked, my voice shaking. My parents exchanged a look. A long, terrifying look. Sweetheart, Mom said slowly, reaching for my hand. There is no Daniel. I laughed nervously. What do you mean? Dad sighed. We made him up. The air was sucked from my lungs. Why would you do that? My voice was barely a whisper. Mom swallowed hard. When you were little, you had an imaginary friend. A brother. You called him Daniel. You talked about him all the time. We thought it was cute. But then one day you stopped mentioning him. And she hesitated, eyes glassy. We just kept pretending. Why? I asked again, my heartbeat hammering. Dad ran a hand through his graying hair. We were trying to help you. You were lonely as a child, and we didn't want you to feel like you lost someone. We thought keeping him alive in stories would comfort you. I felt sick. But I remember things, I whispered. I remember playing with him, racing him in the yard, him teaching me how to climb the tree. We never had another child, Dad said softly. Daniel was never real. I felt my reality shatter around me. Because if Daniel never existed, then who was I remembering? And why, that night, did I hear someone whisper my name in the dark? That night, I barely slept. Every shadow in my room felt like it was watching me. Every creak in the house sent chills down my spine. My parents' words echoed in my head. Daniel was never real. But how could that be? I remembered him so clearly. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to push the memories away. But they came rushing back. Daniel and I sitting on the back porch sharing secrets. Him pushing me higher on the swing. His voice, warm and familiar, whispering, "Don't be scared." A shiver crawled up my spine. At some point, exhaustion took over, and I drifted into a restless sleep. Then I heard it. A whisper. My name. I bolted upright, my heart pounding. The room was dark, but something felt wrong. The air was thick, heavy, like I wasn't alone. Slowly, I turned my head toward the closet. The door was open. I was sure I had closed it before bed. A cold breeze brushed against my cheek, even though my window was shut. Daniel? The name escaped my lips before I could stop it. Silence. Then, soft footsteps. I scrambled for the lamp and flicked it on. Nothing. The room was empty, but the closet door was now wide open. I stared into the darkness, my pulse hammering. I wanted to believe my parents. I wanted to believe Daniel was never real. But if that were true, who had just whispered my name? The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. At school, in the hallways, even in the mirror of the bathroom, I felt it. Something just beyond my vision. That night, I decided to test a theory. I set up my phone camera before going to sleep, pointing it at my closet. If something was messing with me, I wanted proof. I woke up to the sound of something scraping against my floor. Slow, deliberate. I couldn't move. My body was frozen with fear. Then, a whisper. "Why did you forget me?" I gasped, lunging for the lamp. Light flooded the room. Empty. Shaking, I grabbed my phone and checked the recording. The footage showed me falling asleep. Hours passed in silence. Then, around 3:12 a.m., the closet door creaked open on its own. And then, something stepped out. It was blurry, shifting, like a shadow that didn't belong. It stood at the foot of my bed, unmoving, watching me. Then, just before I woke up, it leaned down, right next to my ear. The last thing caught on camera? A whisper. "Don't forget me again." I dropped the phone, my breath shallow. Daniel wasn't imaginary, and he was angry. My hands trembled as I replayed the video. The whisper sent shivers through me. Don't forget me again. I wanted to believe it was just a trick of the light, a glitch, anything but what it looked like. A shadow standing at my bedside, whispering in my ear. Daniel was never real. My parents said so. But then who or what was in that video? I couldn't go back to sleep. I spent the rest of the night scouring the internet for anything that could explain what was happening to me. False memories, sleep paralysis, ghostly attachments. Nothing quite fit. Then, something caught my attention. A forum thread titled "Imaginary Friends That Weren't Imaginary." Most of the stories were harmless. Kids claiming to see people who weren't there, only to grow out of it. But then I found one story eerily similar to mine. A girl had an older brother no one else remembered. She described playing with him, talking to him, until one day her parents insisted he had never existed. Then, years later, she started seeing something lurking in the dark. The last line made my blood run cold. If they tell you he wasn't real, don't believe them. It makes them angry. The next morning, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I stormed into the kitchen, my phone in hand. I have proof. My mom turned from the stove, startled. "What are you talking about?" I showed her the video. The moment she saw the shadowy figure, her face paled. Dad leaned in, his jaw tightening. "That's..." He stopped himself, exhaling sharply. "It's just a trick of the light." I shook my head. "Then explain this." I rewound to the part where the closet door opened by itself. "This isn't normal." Mom looked at Dad, her hands shaking. "We need to tell her." I straightened. "Tell me what?" Dad let out a heavy sigh, rubbing his temples. We didn't exactly lie to you." I stared at him, heart pounding. "You did have a brother once." The world tilted. Mom swallowed hard. "His name wasn't Daniel. His name was Nathan." The name sent a shock through my body. A new memory surfaced, an echo of laughter, of someone calling my name, of a boy just a little older than me. "Nathan, you were too young to remember what happened," Dad said. "Nathan? He disappeared when you were 3. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Disappeared? Mom's eyes welled up. One night he was in his room, and then he wasn't. There was no sign of a break-in, no evidence. It was like he just vanished. I gripped the counter for support. "And you just pretended he never existed?" Mom sobbed. "We had no choice. We were breaking apart. The grief, the guilt, it was too much. So we erased him. We told ourselves you were an only child." My head spun. Nathan wasn't imaginary. He was real, and he was trying to reach me. That night, I didn't lock my closet. I left it open. I sat on my bed, waiting, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the room grew cold. I felt a presence. The shadows in the corner shifted. And then a voice. Soft. Familiar. "You finally remember me." Tears welled in my eyes. "Natan?" The darkness moved, stepping forward. It was blurry, flickering between something human and something else. "You let them forget me," the voice said. Not angry, just sad. I swallowed. I didn't know. Silence, then, "You have to find me." Chills ran through me. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. Instead, the shadows pulled back, retreating into the closet. The door slammed shut. And this time, it didn't open again. The next day, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't crazy. My parents had a son before me, and he was still out there. Somewhere. I didn't know how. I didn't know where. But I was going to find my brother. I barely spoke to my parents the next morning. How could I? They had erased my brother from existence, buried his memory like he was nothing. But I couldn't blame them. Not entirely. If Nathan really disappeared without a trace, I understood why they wanted to pretend he had never existed. But I couldn't. Not anymore. Nathan wanted me to find him. I just had no idea where to start. I decided to go back to the attic. If there was anything left of Nathan, it had to be there. I dug through every box, every forgotten pile of old papers, and just when I was about to give up, I found something. An old shoebox. Inside were a few dusty Polaroid pictures. My breath caught in my throat. They were pictures of a little boy, around 6 years old. Dark hair, bright eyes. He looked like me. Nathan. One picture showed him sitting on a swing in our backyard. Another had him in a blue raincoat holding an umbrella too big for his small hands. But the last one. This one made my stomach drop. It was a picture of Nathan standing in front of our house. But behind him, in the upstairs window, there was a shape. A shadowy figure, just barely visible. I turned the picture over. Scrawled in faded pen were the words, "He is in the between." What did that mean? I stared at the words, my heart pounding. The between? Between what? I needed answers, and there was only one person who might know. Mrs. Callahan. She was our next-door neighbor, an old woman who had lived on our street for decades. If anyone remembered Nathan, it would be her. I knocked on her door, and when she opened it, her eyes widened. "Oh my, you look just like him." I swallowed hard. "Like Nathan." She hesitated, then nodded. "Your parents don't talk about him." I know, but I need to know what happened. Mrs. Callahan sighed and motioned for me to come inside. She led me to her living room, sat down, and folded her hands in her lap. "I don't know everything," she admitted. "But I remember the night he disappeared." My breath caught. "It was raining," she said. "Your mother put Nathan to bed like any other night. But sometime after midnight, she started screaming. Your father ran in. They searched the house, searched the yard, but he was gone." She looked at me, her wrinkled hands trembling. "The strange thing is, the front door was still locked. All the windows were shut. There was no way for him to have left the house." My stomach churned. "Then how did he disappear?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Some say he was taken." I leaned forward. "By who?" She exhaled slowly. "There are places in this world," she said carefully, "that exist between ours. Not quite here, not quite gone. Some call it the veil. Some call it the in-between. And sometimes people slip through." A chill ran down my spine. "He is in the between." "You think that's what happened to Nathan?" I whispered. She nodded. "I always did." I left her house with my mind spinning. If Nathan had been taken to this in-between place, was he trying to reach me from the other side? Was that why I could hear him? See him? That night, I did something reckless. I opened my closet door and sat in front of it, just like I had when I was little. "Nathan," I whispered. "Are you there?" The air grew cold. A whisper. Soft, distant. "I don't have much time." I held my breath. "Where are you?" "Between." His voice was barely a breath. "Find the door." "What door?" I whispered, but the closet suddenly slammed shut. I jumped back, my heart racing. But this time, something was different. Carved into the wood of the closet door, scratched in deep, jagged letters, was a single word. Attic. I ran upstairs, my hands shaking. The attic was cold and silent, the air thick with dust. I swept my flashlight around, searching for anything out of place. And then I saw it. A small wooden door in the far corner. A door I had never noticed before. I stepped toward it, heart pounding. My fingers wrapped around the handle. It was freezing. I took a deep breath and turned the knob. The door creaked open. And on the other side was not my attic. It was something else. A place shrouded in fog, stretching into darkness. A place that felt wrong. A whisper drifted from the other side. "You found me." And then I saw him. Nathan, standing in the mist, reaching for me. And I knew, if I stepped through that door, I might never come back. But I had to make a choice, because my brother was still trapped. And I wasn't going to leave him behind this time. I stood at the threshold of the attic door, staring into the endless fog. The air beyond was dense, humming with something unnatural. The in-between, and Nathan was in it. He stood a few feet away, his face flickering like an old VHS tape, shifting between the boy I remembered and something older, something wrong. "You found me," he whispered again. His voice was layered, as if two people were speaking at once. I hesitated. "Nathan, is it really you?" His expression darkened. "Don't you recognize me?" I did, and I didn't. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to slam the door and pretend I never saw this place. But I had spent too long denying the truth. Nathan was real, and he was trapped. "Step through," he urged. "You can help me." I swallowed hard. "How do I know I can trust you?" Nathan's face twitched. "I'm your brother." His voice cracked. "They let you forget me, but I never forgot you." Guilt tightened in my chest, but something still felt off. I glanced down. Nathan's shadow was wrong. It stretched unnaturally, shifting, twisting, like something else was lurking just beneath his skin. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. Something wasn't right. "Nathan," I said slowly, "why did you tell me to find the door?" His expression darkened. "Because I need you to open it." "But it's already open," I pointed out. He went still. And that's when I realized he couldn't cross through. The in-between wasn't just keeping him inside, it was keeping him out. I took a step back, my pulse hammering. "Nathan," I whispered, "what happens if I step through?" He blinked once, twice. Then, too slowly, he smiled. "You won't have to leave me again." That was the moment I knew. The thing standing in the fog wasn't my brother. I lunged for the door, gripping the knob to slam it shut. But something grabbed me. A freezing skeletal hand clamped around my wrist, dragging me forward. My feet scraped against the attic floor as I fought against the pull. "Don't leave me!" The thing wailed, its voice splintering into dozens of whispers. I gasped, panic rising. "You're not my brother!" It laughed. Not a child's laugh. Not Nathan's laugh. Something ancient. Hungry. "No," it rasped. "But he is." And then, behind the fog, deeper in the darkness, a second figure appeared. Smaller. Weaker. A boy. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. He didn't flicker. He didn't shift. He looked real. "Help me," the boy whispered. His voice was thin, weak, so different from the things still clinging to me. My chest tightened. Nathan. The real Nathan. The monster had been keeping him here. I had to get him out. I made a split-second decision. Instead of pulling away, I lunged forward, yanking my wrist free and grabbing Nathan's hand. His fingers were ice cold, but they curled around mine desperately. The monster shrieked, a sound so inhuman it made my teeth rattle. The fog churned violently, tendrils lashing out as I pulled Nathan toward the door. "No," the thing howled. "He is mine." I didn't look back. I couldn't. Nathan stumbled forward, his grip tightening around mine. The fog clawed at our legs, trying to drag him back, but I held on with everything I had. We crossed the threshold. The moment Nathan's foot touched the attic floor, the door slammed shut behind us. The attic was silent. The door was gone. Only the wooden wall remained, as if the entrance to the in-between had never been there at all. Nathan stood beside me, shaking. His face was pale, but his eyes, his real, human eyes, were filled with something I hadn't seen before. Relief. He turned to me, his voice hoarse. "You remembered me?" Tears blurred my vision. "I'll never forget again." A small, broken smile crossed his face. Footsteps pounded up the attic stairs. My parents. When they saw Nathan, my mother let out a choked sob, covering her mouth in shock. Dad took an unsteady step forward. It's not possible." But it was. Nathan was home. And the thing that had taken him? It was gone. It took time for my parents to accept what had happened. They didn't fully understand it. None of us did. But they didn't question it. They just held Nathan, crying, whispering apologies over and over. We never spoke about the in-between again. The door never reappeared. And at night, I no longer heard whispers in the dark. But sometimes, just sometimes, I wonder if something is still waiting on the other side, waiting for another forgotten child to slip through, waiting for a new name to whisper in the dark. But I don't listen anymore. I never listen. Because I remember. And I'll never let them take him again. Nathan was home. That should have been the end of the nightmare. But something still didn't feel right. The first few days after Nathan's return were strange. My parents treated him like porcelain, constantly checking on him, making sure he ate, asking him if he needed anything. And Nathan? He barely spoke. He wasn't the lively, laughing boy from the pictures I found. He was quiet, observant. And sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, I caught him staring. At me, at our parents, at the closet door in his room. And at night, I heard him whispering. Not to me. Not to my parents. To someone else. One evening, I found him sitting alone in the backyard, staring at the old swing set. He hadn't touched it. "Natan?" I hesitated. "Are you okay?" He didn't look at me. "I don't belong here." My stomach clenched. "What do you mean?" Nathan finally turned his head, his expression unreadable. "How do you know I'm the real one?" I felt my blood run cold. I opened my mouth, then closed it. I hadn't even considered that possibility. I had assumed I saved my brother. But what if I didn't? What if the real Nathan was still in the in-between? And what if the thing standing in front of me was something else? That night, I crept into Nathan's room. He was sleeping, his breathing slow and steady. I glanced at his closet door. Something told me to open it. I reached for the handle. But before I could turn it, a whisper drifted from the other side. "Let me out." I stumbled back, my heart pounding. I spun around to Nathan, and he was awake, sitting up in bed, watching me. His lips curled into a slow, deliberate smile. "Go back to sleep, sis." I swallowed hard, backing out of the room. Nathan was home. But I was no longer sure if that was a good thing. Nathan's words haunted me. "How do you know I'm the real one?" I tried to ignore it. I tried to convince myself I had saved my brother, but deep down I knew something was wrong. And then, the final proof came. The other Nathan one night, I woke up to a sound. A soft tap, tap, tap. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. The noise was coming from my closet. I swallowed hard. Natan? Silence. I slid out of bed, my breath shaky. I reached for the closet door, and before I could touch it, a whisper drifted through. It's not me. My stomach dropped. I yanked the door open. And there, inside my closet, was Nathan. Pale, thin, his eyes hollowed with exhaustion. His clothes were the same ones he had been wearing the day I pulled him out of the in-between. But he was the real one. My legs nearly gave out. Natan? I choked. He nodded, his voice barely a breath. You brought the wrong one back. A chill spread through my body. I spun around. And there, standing in my doorway, was the other Nathan. His smile was too wide. His eyes gleamed in the dark. That's not possible, he whispered. But I could see it now. The thing wearing my brother's skin. It tilted its head, its voice shifting, deepening. You were supposed to forget, it hissed. You were supposed to believe. Nathan grabbed my wrist. Closed the door. The thing in my doorway lunged. I slammed the closet shut. The house shook. A horrible screeching sound tore through the air. The walls trembled, and for a split second, I felt reality twist. And then, silence. I turned around. The closet was empty. The fake Nathan was gone. And the real one? He was still here. Breathing. Real. I collapsed, pulling him into a hug, tears streaming down my face. It was over. The thing that had taken his place, the thing that had tried to replace him, was gone. But as we sat there in the dark, clutching each other, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still watching. Waiting. Because the in-between never lets go completely. And one day, it might try again. Try again.